What you're about to hear is just one part of my deep dive on Zionism's legitimacy. 4. A philosophical case for Zionism. So, for now I was mainly doing some storytelling, but as good philosophers, let's lay out the case like real logicians. P1. Each nation, people, has a right to self-determination. P2. The Jews constitute a people. C1. Therefore, the Jews have a right to self-determination. P3. The Jews couldn't attain self-determination in the diaspora. P4. Israel is the one and only place for the Jews to attain self-determination. C2. Therefore, the Jewish people have a right to self-determination in the land of Israel. Okay, this one is a bit more tricky than in my previous videos because it has two conclusions, but don't worry, we'll take it step by step. Let's actually leave P1 aside for a moment because it is a normative statement, so a bit more tricky than the other premises, which are historical and empirical. For now, we'll just grant P1. P2. The Jews constitute a people. This is one of the most misunderstood facts about the Jews. We are not a religion, or at least in the same way as Islam or Christianity. Being Jewish is first and foremost about belonging to a collective, a nation, a people. To prove that, do you know how you become a Christian, a Muslim, or a Jew? It's very different. You're a Muslim if your dad is a Muslim, but you remain Muslim if you believe in a Muslim faith, that there is one God, Allah, and that Muhammad is his prophet. You're a Christian if you're baptized, which is a covenant with God. But you're Jewish if your mom is Jewish, except for converts, but I'll come back on that. That is it. That means that you can fully reject God later in life, or even convert to another religion and still be considered Jewish. An atheist Jew makes perfect sense. There are a lot, actually. But on the contrary, a Muslim atheist is an inherent contradiction. And no, this isn't a liberal modern interpretation. This is the Orthodox position. Ask a rabbi. In fact, this is what Orthodox rabbis say when asked the question if a Jew who becomes an atheist remains a Jew.
אז האם יהודי יכול, שלא מאמינים בכלל, אתאיסט, לא מאמין, הוא עדיין יהודי?
בוודאי שהוא עדיין יהודי.
אתה יהודי? כן. אז אתה אח? אחינו כל בית ישראל. זה מפריע לי שאח שלי ככה נראה. שהוא לא מאמין.
אני עדיין יהודי?
כן.
אוקיי. איך אני יכול להיות יהודי אם אני לא מאמין?
יהודי זה שאלה של לאום.
אוקיי.
Why does it matter? Because being Jewish isn't just about belief, it is about belonging. It's about peoplehood, and we can see that even at the genetic level. Despite nearly 2000 years of exile, Jews from very different places, Sephardic Jews from North Africa and Spain, and Ashkenazi Jews from Europe, share a common ancestry. That is remarkable when you think about it. These communities were separated for so long, yet the link still remains. And yes, modern genetics also confirms what Jewish traditions has always said, that we have roots in the Middle East. That doesn't mean that there weren't some mix-ups in the diaspora. Of course there were. But it means that the core is still connected to each other and to the ancient Israelites. However, of course, this is just a small part. A people is defined by much more than just genetics. We also share a religion, Judaism, a language, Hebrew, and a distinct culture, one shaped by centuries of rituals, customs, and values. For example, Jews have a long-standing emphasis on debate, learning, and literacy. Jewish culture also tends to emphasize intergenerational bonds, close and big families, and community responsibility. Oh, and what about converts? Remember them? How can they join a people if they just have a religious conversion? Well, actually, this is what a convert says during his or her conversion. Amecha ami ve'eloaich Eloi. This means your people is my people and your God is my God. Notice the order: first people, then God. And once again, this is the Orthodox position. It even comes from the Bible itself and the first converts, Ruth. I think that this is more than enough for being called the people. And this is crucial to the Jewish question. I remember that back in high school, a friend of mine asked me once, Why do Jews need a country? After all, Christians don't have one. At the time, I didn't really know what to say, but now I do. Christianity and Judaism are very different by nature. One is about a universal religion, trying to englobe as many nations as possible, and the other is about a collective, the Israelites and their destiny in time. P3. The Jews couldn't attain self-determination in the diaspora. P4. Israel is the one and only place for the Jews to self-determine. I won't come back on these 2 points because I feel like they were already treated in the previous section or in a previous video if you're watching the short form. Jews, to say the least, didn't have an easy life in the diaspora and could never fully be themselves. The only moment in history where the Jews had full control over their destiny, where Jewish culture thrived without restriction, were when they had full autonomy in their own land. Let's now come back to P1. P1. Each nation, people, has a right to self-determination. This is a cornerstone of modern political thought, particularly in the 20th century. It is rooted in Enlightenment ideas and collective agency, influenced by thinkers like Jean-Jacques Rousseau, with his idea of general will, and John Stuart Mill, who argued that a people with shared culture or language should be able to govern themselves. It is later explicitly articulated by US President Woodrow Wilson after World War I. National aspirations must be respected. People may now be dominated and governed only by their own consent. The idea is that each nation have their own aspirations, so they should be able to have a place to live according to their wish. Of course, this concept is a bit vague because first we can wonder what constitutes a people, and then we can also wonder if individuals or groups within a nation want the same thing. Take Iran, for example. It clearly constitutes a people with shared history, culture, and language. At the same time, there is a clear division between the state, which is a terrorist Islamic government, and large part of the population who wants to live according to a more modern lifestyle, like before the Islamic Revolution of 1979. We might also ask, can different peoples coexist in the same state if they share common morality? This is the idea of the United States of America. You have people from different nations, from different colors, from different religions, but they all live in the same place, and at least in theory, if they share a common idea of justice and morality, it all works out. This is what we call multiculturalism. And finally, there is the problem of when two nations claim the same territory. This challenge is evident in the Israeli-Arab conflict, but we can also take the case of Bosnia and Herzegovina. It is composed of three ethnic groups: Bosniak, who are Muslim, Croats, who are Catholics, and Serbs, who are Christian Orthodox. They somehow managed to make it even more complicated than the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Really, congrats. So, maybe this is the most controversial premise, but it still remains largely valid. Throughout the diaspora, Jews were never fully free or safe. At best, they had restrictions, and at worst, they had pogroms. Having a state of their own meant dignity, safety, and the ability to live according to their traditions and their religion. From all this, conclusion 1 and then 2 follow naturally, and this is why the modern Zionists wanted to re-establish a state in Israel. So, no, Wikipedia, Zionism isn't colonization. It is a return of an indigenous population to its ancestral homeland. And no, Zionism wasn't about having as much land and as few Arabs as possible. The mainstream Zionist movement aimed for a Jewish state in the ancestral homeland. A few envisioned broader borders, but the majority wanted political realism and coexistence. And by the way, the ancestral homeland was roughly the size of New Jersey, and despite what some say, the goal was Jewish self-determination. In its philosophical essence, the Arab question was really orthogonal. Of course, in practice, the two claims eventually collided, and that required difficult compromises, which Zionist leaders were often much more willing to make. Here is what Ben-Gurion, the first Prime Minister of Israel, said on the day of the Declaration of Independence in 1948. The State of Israel will ensure complete equality of social and political rights to all its inhabitants, irrespectively of religion, race, or sex. It will guarantee freedom of religion, conscience, language, education, and culture. It will safeguard the holy places of all religions and will be faithful to the principle of the Charter of the United Nations. Want to see the full argument? Check out the complete video. Links in the description.